Welcome to our latest edition of Deep Dive featuring Hudson Institute. I'm Jonathan Hudson, and in today's edition, we'll focus, of course, on the latest developments on all of Israel's fronts, 7 in total. And to do that, let's now turn to our distinguished panelists, our experts, namely Dr. Mike Duran, Senior Fellow and Director of the Center for Peace and Security in the Middle East at Hudson Institute, formerly the Senior Director of the National Security Council in Washington for the MENA region, namely Middle East and North Africa. We also have Major General in Reserve Gilshon Cohen, formerly the commander of the Israeli Defense Colleges, as well as an Army Corps commander, both on the Northern Command as well as the General Staff Corps commander. And last but not least, Brigadier General in Reserve Amnon Sofrin, formerly the head of the Intelligence Directorate at Mossad, as well as a senior IDF Intelligence Directorate officer. It's great to have all three of you with us. But first, let's turn to Dr. Duran for the topic of the day. What is the key focus that we should draw all of the other discussions from?
Well, good morning, Jonathan. It's great to be here. Thank you. I think the top thing on everyone's mind this morning was this attack yesterday by Hezbollah, this kamikaze drone attack on Israel that killed 4 soldiers and wounded some 60 other soldiers in Binyamina. The main question I have in my mind after this attack is this an incident, a single incident, or is this the beginning of a trend? The big news coming out of the war of the last couple of weeks, month, is the massive change in the balance of power, which we've talked about here, between Israel and Hezbollah and between Israel and Iran more broadly, due to the decapitation of Hezbollah by Israel. So we hadn't seen this kind of attack from Hezbollah since then. And now, when I say this kind of attack, what do I mean? It wasn't just that it was successful in terms of killing a large number of Israelis and wounding a large number of Israelis. It was also very sophisticated. This attack drone was launched under the cover of a rocket barrage. So this is a mixed strike package. This is a kind of characteristic Iranian concept of operations, where you put different kinds of weapons together so that they confuse the Israeli sensors and interceptors. And that's part of the reason this drone was able to get through and undetected. So the question in my mind is this a desperate attempt by Hezbollah to show the flag, so to speak, to show that it's still in the fight and still has some strength? Or is this, so that we're witnessing basically a collapsing organization that's making a last-ditch effort? Or is this the beginning of a kind of reconstitution of Hezbollah after the blows that it received from Israel? I don't have I'm really looking forward to hearing what the generals have to say of this, because this is just a question I have in my mind. I don't have any answers. And then one other point, Jonathan, where the Americans have agreed to deploy in Israel the THAAD system. This is an exo-atmospheric anti-ballistic missile system, the top of the line that the Americans have. According to Bloomberg, that will be deployed on Tuesday. That kind of leads me to believe that the impending Israeli attack on Iran, if it's going to take place, will take place after Tuesday, after that is deployed. I'd love to hear everyone else's opinions about that. There's some speculation in the Israeli press this morning that the attack on Iran might not even happen. I'm not really banking on what's written in the Israeli press, but I wonder what's happening on that on that front as well.
I will be deeply surprised if an attack does not happen. But for that, let's turn to General Cohen. I'd like to ask you, actually, since you wrote an op-ed highlighting the painful day that occurred yesterday when this drone struck so many young trainees who were at the training center next to Binyamina, as Dr. Duran mentioned. This is not new. Obviously, during times of war, the price of blood is a very heavy price to bear. Nevertheless, in history, not only in Israel but at large, this has been quite the ongoing situation, irrespective of the paradigm shift that occurred just a couple of weeks ago, in which Israel regained the upper hand, so to speak, on the war versus Iran at large and its proxies in particular.
Actually, what happened, as Mike emphasized, could be a trend and could be just one anecdote of desperation. I think maybe it is both. Maybe in order to achieve this achievement, they really found a necessity in exact intelligence, because just everyone understands that if they would attack 1 hour later, the outcome was almost nothing. They really attack at the accurate time. Maybe they got instruction for that, and it is absolutely sure that they succeeded to exploit a point of weakness in the Israel defensive system regarding the air defense. And actually, Israel didn't take seriously the threat of drones, as already we can learn from Ukraine, because what we got is just one example. If they will be equipped with thousands of drones like that, as the Russians are deploying this weapon that they are getting from Iran, this will really be open a new arena and with new capabilities. Actually, we don't know. But it means that even without the senior leadership, the field commanders, with support of Iranian instruction, they can yet create a lot of damages to Israel. And we must take that seriously.
Indeed, we must learn from every ounce of information available. General Sofrian, I'd like to hear your take on this, but also within that context, if you may draw this to the Iranian approach to the current state of play.
Let me say, first of all, regarding Hezbollah, I think that we were very rushing to say that Hezbollah is demolished. It's not. Hezbollah is still alive and kicking. It has its own capabilities in the southern part of Lebanon with long-range weapon systems and precise weapon systems that has not been used or activated so far. And I don't believe that this was a kind of act of despair or desperation. I think that they launch a lot of UAVs into Israel. Some of them get into Israel. Let's say that on October 11, there was an UAV that hit a house in Herzliya without being intercepted before. And this is not the first time and not the second time. Some of them used to or succeed in penetrating and overwhelming our air defense systems and getting inside and hitting. And it's not the first time. And it's not only the Hezbollah that is launching UAVs, it's also the backed Iranian militias from Iraq and the Houthis. And each one of them is launching its own UAVs, and we don't have what we call an hermetic solution to that can deny any attempt to get in. And some of them succeed in getting in, and they cause damage. Now, this is not something that is a unique act. It's kind of what we call kind of part of what we call the trend that Hezbollah is fighting right now. They're fighting on the ground with IDF units in southern Lebanon, and in parallel, they hit wherever they can in Israel. And if you compare it to what happened in 2006, we fought for 34 days in Lebanon, and they launch on a daily basis between 150 to 200 rockets each day inside Israel. And this is going on the same way just now. I mean, history is repeating itself right now. And nevertheless, even though we have what we call a huge superiority in air power, we don't succeed denying all the capabilities. And they have a lot of them. So I believe that Hezbollah is not defeated, it's not desperate. It has its own capabilities, it has its own plans, and he's fighting, and he will go on fighting for a long time. Now, regarding the Iranians are busy with two main issues. The first one is to see and to wait to see what Israel is going to do, how Israel is going to react. Are they going to attack what we call initial facilities like oil, like nuclear facilities, and so on? Or will they settle with something which is more, let's say, more moderate and some kind of a message like they did on the first time, like the Israelis, of course, we did on the first time? And this is the main occupation. That is the main offer right now. And they invest a lot of diplomatic efforts to try to talk to many countries around. First of all, to deny the capabilities that they will enable Israeli aircraft to go over the territories, meaning Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, Jordan, and others. And the second one is to be prepared that if Israel is going to attack and cause a huge damage, how are we going to react? And the second issue they are dealing, of course, is what will happen with Hezbollah. They don't want Hezbollah to be totally demolished because this is the main arm they have on the Israeli border, and they want to preserve it. And therefore, they will try to do anything to minimize the damage that we can cause to Hezbollah.
Indeed. Well, just in reference to the drone that struck Herzliya, it struck actually the Wilhelmina House, which is a retirement home actually funded by the Kingdom of the Netherlands. The last time King Willem-Alexander visited Israel, he actually visited there where many elderly Holocaust survivors are living these days. Thankfully, they were all in bomb shelters and none were injured or wounded, so thank God for that. But Dr. Duran, Hezbollah is not destroyed, as General Sofrin mentions accurately, but in contrast to 2006, when Israel launched somewhat of a blitz until the Litani River, encircling the Hezbollah forces south of it and forcing Hassan Nasrallah, the thankfully slain Hassan Nasrallah, to accept defeat by basically adopting 1701, irrespective of whether or not he followed through on that subsequently is irrelevant here. Now we're seeing a very limited incursion in various villages along the border, not really allowing Israel to exercise its military superiority to the full extent of that word, but rather dealing a certain blow with the hope of transforming that into a diplomatic victory. Is that the consequence of the American constraints that were implemented upon Israel?
Oh, I think certainly it's everything that Israel has done in this war. It has to do in negotiation with the Americans. It is making a point. The Israelis are making a point of showing Tehran and Hezbollah that they cannot hide behind the Americans completely. That that Israel will actually cross American red lines. And Israel has to cross American red lines in order to establish its own deterrence. If it simply listens to the Americans every time they say don't, don't go into Gaza, don't go into Gaza City, don't go into Khan Yunis, don't go into Rafah, don't attack the Dakhia, don't go into Lebanon. If they were to do that, then Iran and Hezbollah and Hamas would win. Their forces in Hezbollah's forces in Lebanon would be preserved. Hamas's forces in Gaza would be preserved, and Iran would be untouchable. So Israel has to cross those lines, but it does it very, very carefully because it's also very dependent on the United States. It's a complex relationship, and you can see Israel needs this THAAD system that the Americans are delivering on Tuesday, if Bloomberg is to be believed. It needs it badly, and the Americans have made it clear. They're leaking to the press that they're saying to the Israelis, if you go it alone, if you make these decisions unilaterally, decisions such as killing Hassan Nasrallah, then we will not defend you. Now, whether that's true or not, there's a lot of public pressure in the United States for the United States to work with Israel. Whether it's true or not, Israeli leaders would be very irresponsible if they didn't take into consideration all of these American restraints. Unfortunately, the United States, the Biden administration, continues to see itself more as a mediator between Israel and Iran rather than the leader of a coalition designed to defeat Iran. But I personally believe eventually we're going to see Israeli forces on the Litani River. And I believe that precisely because of all of the analysis that we just heard. These capabilities that Hezbollah has, the drones, ballistic missiles, and cruise missiles, are very, very difficult to suppress. They're very hard to suppress, and you can't really suppress them unless you have a presence on the ground. So I'm not saying we're going to have a total Israeli occupation of southern Lebanon, but the Israelis are going to have to go in and take out positions. They're going to have to launch raids into positions all the way up to the Litani to really degrade Hezbollah sufficiently. This is not guaranteed, but if I had to bet, I'd say there's a high probability that eventually this is what we're going to see.
Well, first of all, I completely agree with you. But General Cohen, when we're looking at the tactical maneuvers that are currently conducted by the IDF, it seems like even the Europeans and the United Nations at large, which refuses to withdraw from certain UNIFIL bases, also agree with Dr. Duran, since they understand that the limited incursions will not bring about the desired outcome that would ultimately bring a sense of security and actual security to the residents of northern Israel, and therefore roughly 90,000 Israelis will remain displaced in their own homeland.
Yes, actually, we can enlarge to speak about the tactical affairs, all the tactical considerations, and actually the main difference from 2006 and now contained by the fact that in 2006 there was not at all a problem regarding the question how we are bringing back the Israeli residents to their home along the border. It was clear that with the end of the war, they are coming back. Actually, now, they will not come if they will not be convinced that the threat is over. And all the missions that have been fulfilled in the last week, just confirming the anxiety that something must really take a change in the whole villages along the border, because what was found there exemplifying that nobody in the Israeli villages along the border could really trust any agreement, because all the assets under the ground are not only well prepared for time of war, they are dedicated to create the conditions for a surprise attack by fulfilling the constraints of 1701 or any other agreement. It means that they could really fulfill all expectations regarding agreement that the Hezbollah will not be allowed to be in southern Lebanon. They will be there as civilians, as those who are living there, and by entering to the tunnels and to all what was prepared under the ground, they immediately are getting metamorphoses and becoming one force ready to attack Israel. This really was a proof that the dedication with the maneuver of Israel, IDF, to destroy all these assets was really necessary. Beyond that, there is a question about the next step and the step after, and then the question of the day after. And here I think that in comparing the situation in Lebanon to that of Gaza, in Lebanon, we can find the common denominator of shared vision between France, United States, and Israel, because the potential to create a new order was bringing back the sovereignty to the real Lebanese people. This is a potential that must be taken by United States and France in order to support the majority of Lebanon to get released from the Hezbollah repression. In that point, the Israeli expectations are absolutely coincide with the United States and France expectations.
With that being said, I can only imagine where we would have been were Israel to accept, at the time at least, the French proposal and the American proposal by Amos Hochstein. I think the disaster would have exacerbated the situation.
Disaster, yes.
Absolutely. But with that, I'd like to ask you, General Sofrin, since there are various reports about the Maronites getting prepared on the one hand, the Druze on the other, there are various activities occurring behind closed doors in Lebanon for the day after, since Hezbollah, despite being a force to be reckoned with, is not as organized and capable on the domestic front as it used to be. Is that something that can be capitalized upon with the support of the French and the Americans, as was put by General Hacohen?
There has to be some what we call necessary circumstances to enable that. The first one is that we will demolish Hezbollah as bad as we can, as much as we can, and cause so much damage that it ceases to be what we call the superpower inside Lebanon. The second issue is to choose a president and not to be now dealing with Hezbollah, whether to choose A or B, his candidate or our candidate, but an agreed candidate upon the Christians, the Maronites, because, as you know, the key in Lebanon is that the president is always a Maronite Christian, and first of all to choose a president, and then to appoint a government and to begin restoring what we call the governance inside Lebanon. Hezbollah will not take his hands out of Lebanon so easily and so fast. It will take a long time. It should be a long struggle. And the Lebanese by themselves would not be able to do that. They will need the support of the French, of the Americans, and us beyond the scenes to assist them as well in order to get rid of Hezbollah. And the Iranians will fight back. So it's going to be a big struggle inside Lebanon on who is going to dominate Lebanon. And I believe that for the long run, this is the only political solution inside Lebanon. Otherwise, we go back to what used to be before this war broke out on October 7 last year.
Not to forget, of course, also the Saudis with the Sunnah and other actors in the region were also vital to the situation in Lebanon. But Dr. Duran, we have, of course, roughly 2 minutes left, and I'd like to hear a very brief 2 sentences each. What are we to expect for the upcoming week? Dr. Duran, we'll start with you.
Well, in the upcoming week, I think the big thing is going to be the Israeli retaliation against Iran. I expect to see it. If the Israelis don't act soon, the window of international legitimacy for it is going to close. So I think it's going to be sooner rather than later. I suspect before Friday, but we'll have to wait and see.
General Cohen?
I'll follow Dr. Duran. The only possibility for Iranian leadership and what remains from Hezbollah leadership to accept a kind of a new order is dependent upon Israeli attack on Iran. Without that, quite the same will continue to rule the arena.
General Sofrin?
I think the 2 issues are on our focus. The first one is how Israel is going to react now on the retaliation coming out from Lebanon, from Hezbollah, meaning what happened yesterday, what happened today in Carmiel, that they launched rockets inside Carmiel. And the second issue is when and how Israel is going to react against Iran on the 181 missiles that were launched to Israel on October 1st.
Indeed. Whatever it is, the message needs to be resounding. But with that, I'd like to thank General Sofrin, General Cohen, and Dr. Duran for all of your insights. And I'd like to thank all of you at home as well. Until our next edition from here in Jerusalem, wishing you a good day.
My name is Eran Lerman. I used to be Deputy National Security Advisor to the Government of Israel, currently Vice President of the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security, a think tank, and the editor of the Jerusalem Strategic Tribune. For the last few years, I've been a regular panelist for TV7, a fantastic opportunity to bring deep and analytical perspectives to the debate over regional affairs, Israeli affairs, international affairs, in the company of some of the best minds in Israel.